Hello everyone, I hope everyone is having a great semester. I've enjoyed watching many of the videos that you've all posted, and I wish you all luck on finishing strong this semester. So let's get started. My name is Bruce Nguyen, and the topic I've chosen to discuss is whether or not the United States was right in dropping the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. The stance that I've chosen on this topic is that the United States was incorrect in their decision of dropping the bombs. They shouldn't have dropped the bombs on both Hiroshima or Nagasaki. If a bomb was necessary, then the location should have been different. But before I continue on my reasoning why I think the bomb was unnecessary or the choice of where the bomb should have been dropped, I'm going to discuss a little bit of the history of it and the events leading up to the first bomb. So the United States found a formidable opponent in Japan. The Pacific War has been called the bloodiest and messiest of the fronts during World War II. That was mainly because of the tenacity of the Japanese soldiers and Japanese force in general. The Japanese fought with a code. They fought with the Bushido code. Again, it was just the way of the warrior. So every Japanese soldier fought to the death. It was very rare for the U.S. to even capture any prisoners due to the fact that there were hardly any allowed to capture, and that hardly any of them ever surrendered. Because to be captured was dishonorable, and losing honor was far worse than death. So they would commit suicide rather than surrender. That just goes to show what kind of enemy the U.S. was fighting. Very tough one. Definitely. I can definitely see why, they thought the only alternative was to drop the bomb because of how much or how stubborn I guess the enemy was. But I guess leading up to the first bomb, the U.S. invaded Iwo Jima and Okinawa. And the number of casualties from both those battles kind of helped with the U.S.'s decision to drop the bombs. Just to give you a little insight on what the casualties were from both the battles, I think in Iwo Jima, roughly 7,000 U.S. soldiers were killed and around 20,000 were wounded. And out of the Japanese forces, 19,000 were killed and 216 captured, which once again goes back to them being such a very a stubborn adversary. So in Okinawa, the U.S. casualties were roughly 19,000 killed and 55,000 wounded. The Japanese forces, about 78,000 were killed and 7,000 were captured. So those numbers right there kind of helped lead to the decision that the United States made in one point of view. So it's a quick conclusion that if the war were to go on, the U.S. casualties would be even higher, and to save American lives, they had to find a quicker solution, and that solution would be found in the atomic bomb. So the U.S. had been working on the atomic bomb since 1940. And ever since Albert Einstein warned them of the Germans' nuclear endeavors, the U.S. had to complete it before them. They had to get it done before any of the enemies did. But fortunately for the Germans, the U.S. finished the testing of the atom bomb after Germany had already surrendered. So no bomb needed in Europe, but not so fortunate for Japan, because on August 6, 1945, Truman authorized the first bomb to be dropped on Hiroshima. According to the U.S., Hiroshima was a strategic target due to the city supposedly having a large military presence. So when they dropped the bomb, that killed 150,000 people, and out of the 150,000, there's only 20,000 soldiers. So you can see there, it was mainly civilian casualties. The second bomb came on August 9th, which fell on Nagasaki, killing 80,000 people, which is roughly a large majority of them were civilians again. And then proceeding to August 14th, August 15th, Japan surrendered. Now, let's go back again before the bomb was dropped. A few days before the bomb was dropped, like Japan was in its final stages already. The U.S. debated amongst themselves if it was even worth it to even drop the bomb on Japan. A lot of critics were saying that, well, a lot of critics like high-ranking generals, a lot of people on the what is it called again? The Secretary of War. I mean, a lot of these guys were disagreeing on the necessity of the bomb. So the Secretary of War at the time was Henry Stimson, and even though he went on with bombing Japan, agreeing with it, he even said afterwards that the bomb shouldn't have been dropped. There was no need for it. He was even quoted saying Japan had no allies, its navy was almost destroyed, its island was under naval blockade, and its cities were undergoing constant air attacks. So basically Japan was practically at its knees at this point, but Truman decided to drop the bomb anyways. Some people will say, if they didn't drop the bomb, Japan would have kept fighting. But by the time, who would know, the bombs had dropped already. But with the blockade happening and the constant bombing, wouldn't have sent troops. By the time we could have starved them out, the bomb wouldn't have been necessary. They would have ultimately come to the conclusion that, hey, we need to come to terms of peace. So some other critics will say it was like the bomb was dropped for more of a self-interest for the United States, because 4 days prior to the first bomb, there was a conference called the the Potsdam Conference. That was between the United States, Russia, and Britain. So you had Truman, Stalin, and Winston Churchill. And during that time, I guess during the conference, relations of U.S. and Soviet were deteriorating. The relations were getting bad. So after that conference, sour note. You had Russian troops in Eastern Europe, so I'm pretty sure they're discussing about that. So the critics say the U.S. decided to drop the bomb on Hiroshima as a power move to show the Soviets that what we were capable of, in hopes of using it as a bargaining chip to get the Soviets to come around or see their side, just to show that we had power. But unfortunately, they even say like us dropping the bomb in Hiroshima was the first shot to start the Cold War. Unfortunately, dropping the bomb didn't have the effects that it was supposed to have on the Russians. Instead of dropping the bomb and then having them maybe go, hey, you know what, the United States has this power, let's go ahead and talk it out. It actually put the fear in them to actually start this arms race and to actually instill more fear and more conflict, more tension. So it amped up the Cold War pretty much. So with the first bomb dropped, the second bomb definitely wasn't necessary because the first bomb, made its point. The second bomb was dropped, and some say it's because the day before the second bomb was dropped on August 9th. The day before, August 8th, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan. And I think to try to retain U.S. interests in Japan, they dropped the second bomb on Nagasaki, and then a few days later, they surrendered. That's one of the critics say that bombs were dropped for self-interest. I personally don't think it was needed. We could have definitely continued the blockade and starved them out. But that's just one of the reasons. The other critics say that the bombs were dropped in retribution for Pearl Harbor and for all the lives lost to the Pacific Front. More of a revenge thing going on, which is also I disagree with too. That's not a good reason to wipe out 100,000 people. But the last point I want to make is that the bomb could have been dropped anywhere. They targeted Hiroshima and Nagasaki, two heavily civilian densely populated areas. They could have dropped it in Tokyo Bay or near Tokyo Bay. It would have been the more humane and the more honorable way of doing it for the U.S. Less casualties, but the same effectiveness of the point. The point could have been put across the same way as if you dropped it on the city or near it, because it's an atom bomb. You're gonna see the mushroom smoke go everywhere. I mean, it's gonna show the power that they have. And then if they were still stubborn, then you can drop one a little closer. So targeting, selecting where you drop the bomb could have been key. You could have saved so many lives if you just would have dropped it strategically in different spots to harm less civilians, and maybe just to show more, to show the power of it, and if need be, up it up a little more. It would have definitely limited casualties, and still let us demonstrate, our capabilities. Overall, it is my opinion that the U.S. only dropped the bomb to demonstrate its power, and to try to set the precedent with the world that the U.S. has nuclear capabilities, and that the U.S. is willing to use that power. But unfortunately, the U.S. decided to use on 2 cities heavily populated with civilians, instead of, like I said earlier, targeting less dense areas, because dropping the bomb in Tokyo Bay or anywhere else, it would have had the same effect, I think. It would have showed the might that the U.S. had with less casualties. Same effective message, just less killing. But thank you for watching, and I look forward to hearing some of your thoughts. You guys have a good one.